course it's time for somebody to call me because I'm getting on live, and that's what your dad does. Look at the ceiling. Isn't that cute? Look at my hole in my ceiling to boot. Wouldn't you think I'm a girl who has everything? Look at this trove, treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold? I want to be able to put this here and not have it only be my boobs. Looking around here, you think, sure, she's got everything. I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty. Got who's it and what's it galore. You want food on? How about 20? But who cares? No big deal. I want more. I want to be where the people are. How long is this one? Let's see. Hi. I want to see him dancing. Okay. Ooh, it's a pretty long one. Let's see how we go. Welcome, welcome. Get started in a moment. If you would like to stay, you can. If you would like to share the live, you can. If you would like to tap the screen, you can. Mattereth not unto me. I'm here for a reading. I was looking for Femme. I need to put Femme in my list so that I can send it to her easy, but I can't. Oh, all right.
Package for you.
Packages. Thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know what about. I know I needed it. I can't remember what it was. I can't open it. Stab it. Reading time. Welcome, welcome. What is it? A shirt. A shirt? Yes. What? Shorts. And what is this one again? Oh, sunglasses. I forgot I got these. Oh, see my new sunglasses? Let's see if I can open it up. Maybe I could. Hey, Fem. Good, you made it. I was trying to find you in my list to share. I need to get you in there so I can share it with you. I just want to open. Greg, oh my God. You're pretty cute. You might really like them. You might be jealous of my Amazon glasses. Maybe I'll wear them while I read. There we go. I'll put the light on. Ooh, ah. They're rainbowy. They have the rainbow on them. On the mirror. Hearts. Okay. That's just fun. That's just fun. All right. Chapter 5. For pride. Yeah. Exactly. My celebration glasses for pride. Because we are going to have our pride booth. We put in our application today. Everybody who helped, thank you so much for your donations so that we could have our pride booth at Utah Pride and Tacoma Pride, and I think we're doing Phoenix Pride number 3 and St. Pete's Pride in Florida. That's 4 prides. We went from 2 last year to 4 because of y'all. So thank you. Thanks for all your help, people. Okay, now we're reading for realsies. Chapter 5, Inheriting Mama Trauma. Do I have tissues nearby? No, we're playing dangerous now. Pain is important. How we evade it, how we succumb to it, how we deal with it, and how we transcend it. Audre Lorde. Yep, open deed. Our ancestry impacts everything we do, whether we're aware of it or not. We bring our ancestors with us into every room we enter. Every conversation we have, every relationship we're in, is somehow impacted by those who came before us, particularly those from our ancestral line. Most BIWOC individuals, born women of color, Black Indigenous women of color, are aware of this fact, as we are forced to endure daily racist misogyny and the legacy it has created, much like our ancestors did. White women, on the other hand, have the privilege of reaping the benefits of their ancestors' actions without much thought or attribution to how those benefits came to be, or the fact that they are benefits at all. As history professor Kevin Gannon said in the documentary 13th, we are the products of history that our ancestors chose, if we are white. If we are Black, we are the products of history that our ancestors most likely did not choose. Oh, fuck. Okay, let me say that again. As history professor Kevin Gannon said in the documentary 13th, we are the products of history, 13th. We are the products of history that our ancestors chose if we are white. If we're Black, we are the products of the histories that our ancestors most likely did not choose. Ugh. The key to escaping the consequences of our ancestors' choices, or lack thereof, is to unearth and address not only their existence, but their impact. The trauma created by our ancestors and the way that trauma gets passed down ancestral lines, causing grief, harm, and ongoing cycles of oppression for us all, past and present. White, Asian, whatever, but particularly for Black and Indigenous women. It is estimated that between... Oh, I forgot to set my timer. Alexa, set the timer for 30 minutes. Will most likely go longer, but gotta make it minimum. It is estimated that between 75 and 90% of all visits to primary care practitioners in America are stress-related. Holy fuck, that's a lot of stress. This is magnified for those subjected to systemic oppression, and all the more for those whose ancestors were as well. Enduring the brunt of white supremacy day in and day out takes its toll on Black and Indigenous women, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. My mom's struggle with a lifetime of race and gender-based violence, which led her to betray her own needs, voice, and dignity, is a prime example. She was unable to share her truth, especially her anger, and these repressed emotions and the oppressive traumas manifested as physical suffering. The impact of my mom's trauma began well before I was born and resulted in her spending decades unable to move while writhing in unfathomable pain. Decades of my being a primary caregiver rather than a child in need of caregiving. My mom's physical pain creating personal pain of my own. Her lifetime of trauma, partly resulting from her mom's lifetime of trauma for her, being passed down the family line like an heirloom. In the end, the pain from all this trauma was so great, dying became her only option for the reprieve that she desperately desired and deserved. Before we get into it, please prepare yourself emotionally and otherwise for the following content: creating medical racism, ableism, misogyny, physical and sexual abuse, and death. That's your content warning, everybody. If you're not here for this, if you can't handle this, I'm downloading my lives and putting them on YouTube under my channel. So if you have to step away at any time and you want to come back to it later, they are going there. If you're wondering, it's just under Everyday Valkyrie. Okay. A lifetime of pain. My mother was forced to starve herself to death. It was the fall of 2015, and she had been battling primary progressive multiple sclerosis, battling her own body for nearly 20 years. That's 2 decades of tripping and falling, hopes and dreams slipping to the wayside, helplessness and isolation. Multiple sclerosis, also known as MS, had ravaged her nerves and organs, leaving her stuck in unbearable chronic pain. Once a decorated interior designer, hostess with the mostest, and role model to single moms everywhere, at just 65 years young, she was left with the sole ability to control nothing more than her eyes and mouth, with bones poking through skin and nerve endings that screamed merely at the touch. And that ain't no way to live. If you don't know anybody who's been diagnosed with MS, I'm happy for you, because it is a very scary thing. I'm happy for you, because it is a very scary thing to know that somebody that you love is going to live a life of pain, and they find out so young. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to put that aside for a minute. Okay. My mom loved entertaining, and our home was a hub of social gatherings and celebrations. Christmas, Thanksgiving, especially Easter, were holidays to be cherished, and she went all out with table settings, 4-course meals, and exquisite decor. To attend one of her dinner parties was an experience of the senses. Every part of you left warmer and wiser and really freaking full. My mom celebrated everything. When I went off to college, I would regularly receive handwritten cards for all occasions, but her dis-ease stole her ability to partake in the things she most loved, like writing, cooking, and hosting. Prior to her diagnosis, my mom had been one of the first female stockbrokers in Canada, working at a Toronto firm by 18. Though she started as a receptionist, she was bright, and the partners picked up on her electricity right away. Not only was my mom a young Jamaican, she was considered neither black nor white, but rather a racial mixture disregarded and unaccepted by both. She would tell me tales of walking the streets and getting spit on by everyone. Her culmination of Black, South Asian, and white ancestry not quite making the cultural cut of the 1960s racial politics. The isolation and ongoing oppression causing her great grief. There was an Italian guy she wanted to marry, but his family wouldn't allow him to be with a colored girl. She was heartbroken. Tired of the misogyny, my mom moved back to her hometown in Kingston. Unfortunately, she also moved back to a country in crisis. When my mom returned in the mid-70s, Jamaica was in the midst of its most violent political conflict to date. On more than one occasion, she was chased and shot by random men for no reason. After the second such occurrence, where the police refused to believe or assist her, she became depressed, hopeless, and suicidal. A psychiatrist diagnosed her with the phobic hysteria. It was the 70s, after all. So medicalized misogyny was alive and well. My mom was scared and stressed, and the whole experience was disturbing. She left Jamaica never to return and never spoke of what happened. After her second departure for Jamaica, my mom worked for another securities firm out west. But when the big stock market crash of 1987 hit, she lost everything. Her white male counterparts protected one another to save their estates while throwing her under the bus. In the midst of the crash, she met and married my father, a Jamaican survivor of physical and other abuses himself. She wound up badly beaten and locked in a closet at my father's hand while pregnant with me. Meanwhile, meaning I have experienced abuse from the womb. When my father laid his hands on me, my mom left with nothing but the clothes on her back and baby Rachel in her arms. In addition to enduring the impact of white supremacy through intimate partners, capitalist greed, and post-colonial disarray, my mother also suffered severe psychic pain resulting from sexual violence. In the course of writing this book, I discovered she was sexually abused as a child, not only by a family member, but likely by her own mother, my grandmother, an alcoholic hypochondriac who inflicted emotional, verbal, and sexual violence on several members of my family. Learning this was painful beyond words, and I hold a lot of anger at my grandmother for her horrendous acts. But I also acknowledge she was a survivor of abuse herself. I, like my mother, and like her mother before her, inherited traumas passed down the ancestral line from environmental and genetic influences alike. As Ayanla, I'm not going to get this name right. I'm going to try. Ayanla Van Zandt said, "In the womb, we marinate in the energy that becomes the foundations of our beginnings, our sense of self." I'm really sorry I butchered her name because that was beautiful. I'm going to say it again. As this beautiful person said, "In the womb, we marinate in the energy that becomes the foundation of our beginnings and our sense of self." Inherited trauma. An emerging science has found links between the traumas our ancestors endured and impacts on our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Epigenetics is also known as inherited trauma. It is much debated by modern whitewashed science, but the premise is that the expression of a gene is altered or modified in some way by environmental factor. For example, childhood abuse or a lifetime of enslavement without changing the DNA code itself. Several mice studies have shown how trauma can pass down the familiar line. One study found that mice who were repeatedly shocked while smelling cherry blossom developed a flinch, a trauma response, when exposed to the scent on its own. The mice began to equate cherry blossom with the pain. Nothing shocking about that. Ha ha ha, pardon the pun. But scientists also found that the offspring of those mice exhibited a similar trauma response when exposed to the scent of cherry blossom. And it gets more wild. The grandbabies of the mice who were shocked also exhibited a heightened sensitivity to the cherry blossom scent. The trauma was subtly altered between the 3 generations, but it was there, and it was inherited. In humans, a small study found that the descendants of Holocaust survivors had epigenetic changes to a gene linked to their stress hormone, resulting in higher states of stress for survivors' offspring. Even if the trauma is altered and lessened in later generations, the impact of inheriting our ancestors' trauma can be massive, particularly for Black and Indigenous women, those whose ancestors have faced kidnapping, enslavement, genocide, and all-out oppression for hundreds of years. Harvard bioethicist Lemuel Lee Bitsoy argues that Native healers, medicine people, and elders have always known this, and it is common knowledge in Native oral tradition. It is what Bonnie Duran, associate professor at the University of Washington School of Public Health, calls the colonial health deficit. Yep. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. Not only do we inherit ancestral trauma through our genes, but also from our environment, referred to as historical, multi-generational, or intergenerational trauma. Within the Black American context, Dr. Joy DeGruy has coined the phenomenon post-traumatic slave syndrome, or PTSS. Her research concluded that PTSS is the set of intergenerational maladaptive behaviors, beliefs, and actions originating as our ancestors' survival strategies to cope with the extreme stress caused by enslavement, systematic racism, and anti-blackness, including lynching, Jim Crow laws, sterilization, and mass incarceration. As Dr. DeGrue asserts, we are talking about multiple traumas over lifetimes and generations. Living in black skin is a whole other level of stress. Be it in America, Canada, or the Caribbean, the impact of the enslavement of Africans worldwide has left a wake of inner and outer turmoil across the black the black diaspora. In my case, inherited and intergenerational trauma has contributed and or manifested in cycles of abuse, addiction, and chronic illnesses throughout my ancestry. My Black American family members with the strongest and longest legacy of enslavement have suffered the most harms. Still, we didn't just inherit trauma, we inherited resilience too. Black folks are some of the most adaptable people on the planet because we were forced to be. The white folks benefit greatly from the oppression of all BIPOC individuals. We have a stronger hold on community and survival. Our oppressors harm themselves by harming us. Hey T, hey Doc. Inheriting dominance. There are adverse impacts to being the dominator as well as being dominated. Those who carry out the oppression of others deprive themselves, hey Frozer, try again. Those who carry out the oppression of others deprive themselves of our most human need, connection. Oh yes, I wholeheartedly believe that this is huge in the white community. As Dr. Tarakali shares, dominant group members face a disruption of their understanding or felt sense of interconnectedness. Boy, my mouth is not reading well today. Try again. As Dr. Tarakali shares, dominant group members face a disruption of their understanding of or felt sense of interconnectedness with those members of the group they are oppressing. In addition, children in dominant groups fear losing connection with and acceptance from their dominant caregivers and or community in the event that they do not fulfill the societal implied, often unconscious expectations of the dominant group. There's a lot of words. Let's read that again. Dominant group members face a disruption of their understanding of or felt sense of interconnectedness with those members of the group they are oppressing. In addition, so we lose our understanding and sense of connection with those we are oppressing. Okay. In addition, children in dominant groups fear losing connection with and acceptance from their dominant caregivers and the community in the event that they do not fulfill the societal, implied, often unconscious expectations of the dominant group. That goes back to the question of when did you first know that it isn't safe to stand up when you see harm, especially if it's to somebody who's supposed to be oppressed. That goes back to that because we search for that acceptance of the group. In this way, domination is very much inherited from our environment and upbringing, and it creates grave harm for all. For white and white-passing folks, many, if not most of whom have ancestors who committed unspeakable harms toward communities of color. The intergenerational trauma that derives from being descendants of people who could commit such atrocious acts, be it on a communal or personal scale, is not something we ought to take lightly. Harming others also harms you. And the shame and guilt and all the repressed emotions that go along with them live on across generations. as does the harm of having to erase one's culture to belong to whiteness. Oh God, that's a pain that's thousands of years old. I already wept for that. I didn't. Ugh. Yep. Yep. If you have not mourned the loss of, if you are white and you have not thought about how much you have lost because your great, however many back, 1,000 years plus, grandfather and grandmothers had to disconnect themselves from the land that they were indigenous to. If you have not sat with that and had to think about how hard that was to give up that part of themselves, that's a mourning that needs to happen. Oh, you got the dots. Oh no. The fact that thousands of years ago our white ancestors gave up their indigenous life, their connection to the land. They had to give up their culture, their traditions, their songs, their rituals. They had to give all that up to become white. And if you have not sat with that and mourned for that grandma who used to, to assimilate, for that grandma who used to dance under the moon, if you have not sat with that, that's a mourning that I think has to happen. Okay. Those who oppress others are in their own world of pain. When I witness white men out in the woods with hoods, not only do I observe violent aggressors, I observe people in pain. People who are hurt, scared, disconnected, and in need of somewhere to place the anger that arises as a result of desire not to feel their deep feelings. I witness people who absorb the pain of their ancestors I witnessed people who absorbed the pain of their ancestor and, as was also often passed down to their familial line, chose to inflict the pain on BIPOC individuals. As Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps Scores, had said, our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another. Restoring relationships and community is central to restoring well-being. That's beautiful. Let me try that again. Our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another, and restoring relationships and community is central to restoring well-being. Trauma begets trauma, and the cycle has and will continue unless white folks and other dominators actively seek to stamp it out in themselves. Only then can we stamp out the impacts of those traumas have had on the most marginalized. And that's something that, again, we have to take the dissection of racism and the dissection of white supremacy, which is where you try to understand it and you can see how it affects the world and you can see where it fits outside. That's different than deconstruction, which is where you turn back inside and find the pieces inside. And I think a lot of white people stop before they get to that step because it's super uncomfortable. It's not fun to look at. And that's why we carry it with us into other spaces. That's why we carry it with us into our politics, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on. We carry it with us into our religions. We carry it with us into our atheism. We carry it with us everywhere we go. Unless we turn around and actually take a look at how racism and white supremacy is very much ours. The mind body. As an only child, I hung on my mother's every word. Plus, she said everything with such conviction it was hard not to. But as her MS progressed and traumas became more evident, I began to understand where she was stuck. Stuck in stories, in shame, and in serious suffering. My commitment to personal growth and a shit ton of therapy has illuminated the codependent nature of our relationship and the areas I needed to address in order for us to heal. I had always put my mom and her needs first, even as a child. But after decades as her primary caregiver, it was time for me to begin to care for myself too. By the summer of 2015, we were no longer speaking every day as we had for my lifetime before. But she phoned me while I was at work, and in that discussion, she began to tell me atrocities that made me leave my body. It was yet another account of being abandoned by the caregiver she depended on, and her hands being unable to dial her modified phone to let me or anyone else know. Of being left soiled, feces-filled diapers for 14 hours at a time, of occupational therapists undermining her black pain, and social workers misconstruing her black anger. An ongoing tragic tale of how the government refused to give her the money she needed for sufficient care and was once again trying to fuck her out of essential items. I was used to these stories by now, but the impact of these accounts never ceased to soften. I could never adequately brace for the impact of the violent acts committed towards her or the pathology of her predicament. So in order to prevent myself from completely falling apart, I pieced from my body. I disassociated from my physical self and compartmentalized this egregious information that I was able to get there until I was able to get there to help remedy another terrible situation. My mom also lived in a near-dependent, disassociated state in order to merely survive her day. As her hardships became increasingly acute, my ability to handle it all became increasingly dysfunctional. I was burned the fuck out, and to be honest, I was tired of dealing with it, and I didn't want to play mom anymore. To be Miss Fix-It, lawyering myself up and preparing for the battle against oppressive people and institutions alike. I was just tired, and I would later learn that these are classic symptoms of trauma. Trauma can manifest as fatigue, disassociation, and reduced ability to deal with stress, helpless feelings, anxiety, hypervigilance, and more. We often feel trauma is reserved solely for the most egregious of occurrences, but studies have shown that it's not all that extraordinary. That's very true. The first time I heard anybody talk about trauma and childhood trauma, I was like, you came from such a benign and like some people would look at your childhood and think it was like a Disney film. But it was a different kind of trauma. It wasn't the kind that we think of, especially if you're older like me. And that word has a very different meaning for, I think, Gen X and older, which is why a lot of them roll their eyes when people talk about trauma. Hey, Medusa. Trauma can manifest as fatigue, disassociation, and reduced ability to deal with stress, feeling helpless, anxiety, hypervigilance, and more. We often feel trauma is reserved solely for the most egregious of occurrences, but studies have shown that it's not all that extraordinary. An experience that is distressing or emotionally painful, that overwhelms your ability to cope and leaves you feeling powerless, can result in some spectrum of trauma, especially if it occurs during childhood, which happens more than we think. Studies have shown that on average, 61% of adults have experienced at least one type of adverse childhood experiences, ACE, before turning 18. And 1 in 6 people have experienced 4 or more types, myself included. These include abuse, divorce, witnessing violence in our home or community, all of which can result in trauma, even if we are unaware of it. As Dr. Gabor Mate, author of When the Body Says No, shares, the essence of trauma is disconnection from ourself. It is the separation of our mind from our emotions, but our mind is not separate from the body. In fact, leading experts refer to it as the mind-body. to encapsulate their inherent interconnectedness, a foundational concept in traditional Chinese and other Eastern medicines. Basically, anything that promotes a repression of our emotional state, especially challenging emotions like anger and grief, can adversely impact our health. Things like being oppressed because of your race or gender identity, feeling overwhelmed at the state of the world, or being abandoned by a caregiver as a child. When it becomes too painful for us to stay connected, we disconnect as a defense. For me, the disconnect came from a culmination of navigating white supremacy in my own life, while also working tirelessly to help care for my mom, who was not only suffering as a result of a lifetime of trauma stemming partially from systemic oppression, but mired in a medical and social institution founded and steeped in racism, sexism, and ableism. Like many other Black women, my mother and I were forced to deal with the compounding impact of white supremacy from both the ancestral trauma and the tangible daily oppression it created. Because the mind body are one and the same, our emotional trauma can manifest into physical disease or the body's response to a lack of inner peace. It is unsurprising that my mom, who never felt sufficiently safe to share and thus heal her traumas, wound up stuck in her own body. Oh, God. Debilitated and unable to move, paralyzed by fears of white supremacy's creation, the stress, trauma, and repressed rage transmuted into chronic illness, as though my enslaved ancestors' shackles were replaced by mental ones. The cause of MS remains elusive to this day, though it is known that there is a genetic and environmental element, with many believing that stress plays a significant factor. This is in no way to blame my mom for her illness at all, but as Dr. Matei explains, when we repress our emotions, we relegate them to the unconscious realm, which, to be blunt, totally fucks with our body's defenses. This can lead to those defenses turning against us rather than offering protection. Impacts of mind-body disconnect are most often found in folks with a long history of trauma and emotional repression, which creates stress on the body, and trauma and emotional repression, which creates stress on the body and usually manifests as chronic illnesses like cancer, Alzheimer's, or autoimmune disorders like MS. Okay, guys, this is going to get rough. Again, if you need to tap out, please feel free. You're not going to miss anything. You can watch it later on the YouTubes, because this next section is called How to Kill Your Mother. Here we go. Alexa, stop. I kind of want to power through this one. It was Midsummer's Day when I got the call. I was rushing out the door when she called to tell me of yet another traumatic incident. She had suffered more abuse by caretakers' hands. Her pain was constant and immeasurable, and though she needed 24/7 care, it wasn't financially feasible. As an attorney and daughter, I had done all I could to fight for and defend her, but we were at a loss. I told her how much I loved her, but I couldn't keep on being her only source of support. Mom, I think it's time we find you a therapist so that I can get you the emotional support you deserve, I said, and for the first time in a long time, she broke down. I know, honey, she said. I can't do this anymore, and it's only getting worse. I think it's time for me to die. Those words were utterly heartbreaking, but deep inside I also felt something like relief. After decades of supporting her as an only child and primary caregiver, constantly fighting with the racist systems that strive to keep her stuck, I wasn't sure how I was going to survive decades to come of being her primary source of support. I wasn't sure how I was going to survive decades to come of being her primary source of support. In fact, I often wondered if I would be the one who died first trying to manage it all. The truth is, there was no place that would sufficiently support my mom. Nowhere for a neurotypical quadriplegic black woman in a chronic, untouchable pain to try to have a life. That is not to say that it's not possible. It is to say that racist, ableist, sexist, and capitalist society did not prioritize caring for her or for those like her in order to make it so. Folks of all abilities live thriving, joyful lives, but my mother was and could not. Her days were confined to ensuring basic survival, and survival was no easy thing within the white supremacist institution charged with her care and the impacts of trauma from a lifetime of various injustices. Her immense suffering manifested as physical pain, but also hopelessness, anxiety, and loneliness, and the loss of meaning. In short, it consumed her entire existence. No matter how hard we tried with our limited resources, the oppressive obstacles, and the magnitude of her repressed traumas, it just wasn't in the stars. White supremacist capitalism wants us to live as long as possible so that we can produce as much as possible without any care for our well-being or lack thereof, while the institutionalized fear of death makes many rich white men richer.
Alpha.
That is so much more true today with how much even the safety nets, the social safety nets that we see people have put into their whole lives, and they're literally being stripped away and stolen. Sure, my mom could live, and as an inhale obstacle. Sure, my mom could live as in inhale oxygen, but she couldn't have any kind of life. Dying while she still had some semblance of dignity felt like the only option left. Our family doc and I thought that moving her to hospice with 24/7 care would allow her to pass in peace. She could finally get the pain medication she needed, as she no longer required all of her mental functioning to handle her underfunded staff and ensure that they didn't harm her. However, as it turns out, it's not always so easy to die. It is a sacred and special process, and both your mind and body must be totally on board. Otherwise, you're staying put. The mind-body is for real. Hospitals terrified my mom, and for good reason, given her prior experiences of being mistreated by doctors from the age of 8 when she was involuntarily used as experimental birth control subject by the Americans in Jamaica. Fuck you. Fuckity fuck. What? Sorry. She just slipped little nuggets of knowledge in there. I was not prepared for that. 8 years old. God damn the Americans. American government fucking sucks. I'm just saying. Everything we touch, everything that white supremacy touches. God. This justified fear is shared by many black women, for who, for example, have maternal death rate 12 times that of white women in New York City hospitals. My mom was moved to hospice, named after a white saint, 'cause aren't they all? And from there, I did everything in my power to help her find her relief, to help her die. Assisted suicide wasn't yet legal, so we were on our own, left to the whispers behind shut doors and rampaging her drug cabinet for a killer cocktail. Being the baddest bitch that my mom was, I thought she could just make up her mind, and that would be that, you know, the old wish yourself to death trick. But no such luck. Day in and day out, over the course of 3 months, I stayed by her bedside. I fought with the doctors about my mom's care, sleeping on the pullout to help her feel secure for the first week. As the only black folks in the whole hospice, was immediately apparent to me that we were treated differently. My mom was out of her comfort zone, and the medical staff didn't help her feel safe. After merely a week into my mom's stay, the white head nurse suggested that it was perhaps the wrong place for someone like my mom. The fuck you say? To tell a sick, disabled black person in unspeakable pain that she didn't belong in the only place she had left in the world was appalling. My mom's home was now gone, her possessions given away. The hospice, that room, was all she had left, and God damn it, she was going to die in it. I took the role of researcher, trying to find some way I could confidently end my mother's pain, end her life, including searches like how to kill your mom, which I do not suggest. Definitely not. In the depths of despair, I considered it all, considerations that took time and energy I could have otherwise spent at my mother's bedside, supporting her through her pain and in her most dire time of need. Had we been treated with adequate care or concern, I could have. In the chasm that is her absence. In the chasm that is her absence, that is perhaps what angers me the most. Finally, the head of palliative care, one of the all-white doctors sat me down to mansplain to me that they couldn't simply drug my mom into oblivion. It wasn't allowed, and even if it was, he wouldn't do it. Your mom's not dying, he said. She could live another 10 years. Most of her organs are healthy, strong even. She's just in constant pain. Yeah, I responded, and that's not living. The hospice wanted nothing to do with me, my mom, our situation. I had some compassion for that. Some. But white supremacy, ableism, and misogynistic, they can all get in the way of supporting a patient, her family, and helping them do what's right and best for them, especially when the patient is a black disabled woman subject to medical racism and an onslaught of dangerous stereotypes about her mental capacity and tolerance for pain. The racial empathy gap. Numerous studies have shown that there is a pervasive racial empathy gap throughout the medical system, where black folks are perceived as experiencing less pain than white folks. Some studies have found that the same doctor will prescribe less pain medication to a black patient versus a white patient exhibiting identical symptoms. White folks from the age of 7 years old have been found to exhibit strong and reliable racial bias, concluding that black people feel less pain, which leads to us receiving less compassion and inadequate medical care. It took decades to confirm that my mother had MS, while her white doctors routinely disregarding her symptoms and ignoring her welfare. And then they misdiagnosed her. At 13 years old, I was told that my mom had Lou Gehrig's disease, a fast-onset degenerative disease that only had a few years left to live. Had she been properly cared for, her MS would not have gotten to the point that it did. And now that we were out of options and simply seeking support to help my mom die with dignity, we were once again being brushed aside. A few mornings after the head nurse had more or less told us to leave the hospice, my mom told me about a white night nurse who yelled at her and refused to change her diaper once again, leaving her utterly helpless and forced to sleep in her own shit. Black folks seek out medical attention to support us in healing from physical and emotional trauma as anyone would, only we frequently face more harm and oppression under that same system's care. At my grandfather's funeral, which I attended the morning after my mother died, I met a head nurse from another hospice. She had heard what my mom and I endured and expressed that it never should have happened. We shouldn't have had to fight to be treated with basic decency, but we did. It's not physical pain your mom has experienced, it's emotional pain, I was told by the hospice counselor in another justification for refusing to increase my mom's pain meds. It's trauma. Yeah, cool, I know. It's manifesting as physical pain, so what's the damn difference? I was told repeatedly by the nurses, doctors, and counselor that there was nothing that could be done. No way to help my mother hasten death or alleviate her suffering, and any thoughts that I had to that end were sadly mistaken. Except that wasn't fucking true. My mom's family doctor, a South Asian woman and a fucking legend, raised the option of voluntary cessation of eating and drinking, which is fancy terminology for starving and dehydrating yourself to death. Assisted CUD. Assisted suicide might have been illegal, but straight up suicide was not. The trick, though, was to get the racist jerks at the hospice to move past their oppressive perspectives and to help keep Mama Bear as pain-free as possible during the process. But because they were racist jerks, they wouldn't make that promise. So we called in a medical ethicist, someone who specialized in helping to solve medical ethic dilemmas. And folks, we sure as fuck had a dilemma on our hands. In the most important and profound use of my legal training to date, I convinced the ethicist that my mom was absolutely entitled to terminal sedation, in regular speak, to be kept sedated on pain meds until she died. As I walked out, I felt triumphant. Kiss my sweet black ass. If medical establishments had just done their job and shown some fucking compassion, it could have saved us from this whole fucking fight. Medical racism struck again, but we showed them. Or so I thought. I passed by the room next to my mom's, and saw the patient who had been there since we first arrived months before was gone. There were no feet poking out, no sheets or blankets on the bed. It was just nothing. And then it hit me. I had spent so much time and energy fighting that I had barely stopped to settle into what I was fighting for. My mom would soon be dead. Gone. Yeah, I know. And I would be alone. Okay. I got a restriction because I'm talking too much about death. All right, I might have to start using TikTok words instead of reading the true words, which, of course, is going to cut back on the impact of the truth that she is telling. But I don't want to stop. Over the next 12 days, I watched and guarded my mom as my mom slowly slipped from this world into the next. It was painful and harrowing and heartbreaking, and simultaneously magical and beautiful and transcendent. I sat by her bedside in total silence and basked in the glow of a soul that was half in this world and half in the next. I could sense something far, far greater than myself, and over those weeks any doubts that I may have had about the other side were vanquished. Sometimes my mom was lucid, and she sounded strong and entirely in her body. On one such occasion, she asked for her hand mirror, and I held it up so that she could see her face. She moved her cheeks around and furrowed her brow and then exclaimed, "Shit, I may be unaliving, but I still look pretty damn good." The next day, she was unable to speak despite her best efforts. Those were the heartbreaking days. All she could utter was unintelligible sounds, and I did my best to fulfill my duty as guardian and gatekeeper to her transition. I played Deepak Chopra recordings and her favorite songs, all Celine. I burned incense, which wasn't allowed, but fuck it. Fuck all y'all. I brushed her hair. I did anything and everything that I hoped a loved one would do for me when my time comes. Between her now zombie-like state and the burnout from all the running around, and managing and guarding and witnessing and fighting. I was at my wit's end. If I had been exhibiting trauma symptoms before this whole hospice ordeal, you best believe I was in the thick of it now. For 12 years, I had been living as though every moment could be my mom's last. And for 2 decades, I spent every moment worried about her welfare. I went home that night and debated whether or not to go back. I had always been hyper-responsible, dutiful daughter most of my life. I lived under the acute fear that my mom would unalive well before either of us was ready, and I had to make the hard decision not to go. I made the hard decision not to go. I was near the brink of something bad, and who knew how much longer all this would last. I went to bed and awoke at 2 a.m. I felt something odd and contemplated calling the hospice, but decided not to. I put my head down and went back to sleep, and 11 minutes later they rang. Rachel, your mom is gone. We're so sorry. Pause for a minute. Oh. That's why it's called the mama trauma, right? This one, inheriting mama trauma. Woo, doggy. Oh. Oppression kills, unalives. In the weeks and months that followed, my restriction is gone now. In the weeks and months that followed, I endured grief unparalleled. It felt like the weight of a lifetime of pain fell down on me all at once, like a ton of bricks. Not only from physically losing my mom, but all the losses, oppressions, and pain Not only from physically losing my mom, but from all the losses, oppression, and pain, both I and we had endured all along the way. I relived the many lifeline alerts I had received in the middle of the night to rush to her aid, and how I lived across the street from her social housing unit in order to do so. I remembered all the times we barely had enough to eat. I could hear the scream she made before I found her lying on the living room floor, white copperet stained with the blood spilling from her head, just days before my first year law exams. I recalled the way our justified anger was routinely used against us. I reflected on the time I was nearly kicked out of university after my mom drained my student loans to pay rent because she didn't qualify for disability payments, and I was scared to be subjected to the black welfare mom stereotype. Times I had to call the paramedics because she had stopped breathing at 4 a.m., and then worked 18-hour days on $1 million deals to make rich men richer. And I was left to endure the cavernous ache of her absence, but also the fact that white supremacy had not forced so much trauma upon her. Had she been diagnosed earlier and or treated with equitable health care, she never would have had to end her life at all, and I wouldn't have to have helped kill my own mother. I was mired in pain, and it comes from combating racist, misogynist, ableist system that made her dis-ease, her death, and my grief all the worse, with no one to constantly care for anymore. The thick haze of my own trauma, the burden of carrying a lifetime of white supremacist harms descended upon me. Within 3 months, I had suicidal ideations. Had it not been for my connection to spirit, the support of a few close friends, and my own now husband and a stint of antidepressants, I'm not sure I'd still be here. The compounding isolation of my loss and having my experiences constantly invalidated by misogynoir made me want to unalive my own self. In the end, I was empowered. Ding, 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 ding. Thanks, Lizzie. In the end, I was empowered to get a hold of my situational depression before it caused me or others grave harm. But I wondered how many other Black women have died and continue to die as the result of tremendous trauma systems of oppression inflicted upon us and our families. Women like Erica Garner, who died of a heart attack at 27 after her father, Eric Garner, was unalived by the NYPD officers who never faced an indictment. As a queer black woman living in white supremacist world, the trauma I endured and impact on my health are never ending. The consequence of inherited traumas like PTSS and daily lived traumas from enduring misogynoir have had atrocious consequences on both my family's health as well as my own. I suffer from anxiety and the adrenal burnout from being forced to live in a near constant state of hypervigilance. My immune system is compromised. My stress hormones have been shot to hell, and it is hard to rest or digest because my body has been in fight or flight for decades, if not a lifetime. Black and indigenous communities around the world are diseased and dying from the impacts of white supremacy. For example, Black American women are 7.5 years biologically older than white women because of because of our telomeres, the end of the chromosomes controlling aging and key biological functions, are shrinking as a result of excessive chronic stress factors, including racism, classism, and sexism.
Oh no, Nova.
In Canada, Black folks have a 60% increased risk of psychosis compared with non-Black folks, and are most likely to face racism from medical establishments, increasing their risk of self-harm. In South and Central America, indigenous people endure the highest rates of morbidity. Oh my God, morbidity. In South and Central America, indigenous people endure the highest risks of morbidity. I cannot say that word tonight. Morbidity. Eric said it. The highest rates of morbidity and mortality, with the least access to health services compared with non-indigenous populations. My apologies, Central and South American indigenous people, for not being able to word right. In the UK, Black women are most likely to suffer from psychological distress. Good night, baby. I love you. Depression and anxiety, while Black men are 10 times more likely to suffer from mental health issues than white men. All the foregoing health issues are exacerbated in times of global pandemic like COVID-19, as Black folks who, due to white supremacy, have higher rates of underlying health conditions and are more likely to die when hospitalized. It is no surprise or mistake that we are unaliving at disproportionate rates. Indigenous folks are all too often discarded by medical researchers and professionals and left for dead, much like Joyce Echawan, who was unalived in a Quebec hospital when a medical staff administered the wrong drugs and then called her dumb and only good for sex as she wailed for help. Fuck those assholes. This is just a glimpse into the health consequences of systemic oppression on Black and indigenous folks. And we haven't even covered the deaths caused by police brutality, the criminal justice system, or other state-sanctioned murders. Every day, in every way, white supremacy kills. And in the midst of COVID-19 and the Black genocide pandemics, government agencies around the world declared what Black folks have known for centuries: anti-Blackness is a public health crisis. I know firsthand how the stress from oppression can kill, and yet I can never fully divest my nervous system from the same systemic web of lived and inherited stressors. I cannot help but wonder, am I destined to suffer the same fate? Toward healing. Okay, we're almost done, and then we get to have our soul care, which we're going to definitely need today. Whew. White supremacy creates trauma and causes havoc on the health of humanity as a whole. BIPOC individuals, as well as white people, LGBTQIA+, and straight folks, both trans and cis beings, no one is impacted more than the most marginalized, who are more traumatized by oppression than further oppressed because of those traumas still. We have all the harms in... Oh, puzzle time. Boop. I did it. Okay. Still, we all have harms in need of addressing. When we are not undertaking our inner work, these harms go unacknowledged, unaddressed, and ultimately unhealed. If we repress our emotions, especially our rage, they may very well manifest in the dis-ease, if not death. Especially for Black and Indigenous women who also face systemic oppression, including medical racism and misogyny. For white and other dominant groups, the inability to honor and tend to your inherited and social traumas is not only of great risk to your own health, but to the health of Black and Indigenous women and other oppressed groups who suffer at the hands of your unhealed wounds. Trauma is not only an experience, it is a structure of oppression. Right now, we have the privilege and opportunity to help heal ourselves from the inside out, across time and space, for ourselves, for our ancestors, and our future ancestors. Healing is possible, but it requires a deep examination within. As you move through this work and through the world, pay close attention to the ways that your body is talking to you, and your body, if not your ancestors, will tell you when you are in stress, through sensations such as headaches, fatigue, indigestion, insomnia, and more. Do your best to notice when you are disconnecting from yourself and why. Pay attention to the triggering pieces and show yourself care so that the emotions they evoke don't lodge within your physical self. Racial justice requires massive upheaval of the mind, body, and spirit. It demands illumination, if not only for our pain, but the pain that is passed down our families for generations and perhaps lifetimes. We must acknowledge our ancestral history. We must acknowledge our ancestral history, whatever that may be, however hard that may be. Address the harms your ancestors endured or inflicted, or both. Examine what wounds you have learned, absorbed, or perpetuated, and then begin to identify their stories and your feelings. Stop repressing and start expressing. Your life, my life, all of our lives depend on it, because white supremacy is killing us all, both internally and externally, Black and Indigenous women in particular, and because no one else should be forced to die like my mom did, and no child should be forced to bear witness. Until we do the inner work to address our personal and collective traumas and eradicate white supremacy, more Black and Indigenous children most certainly will. Here we go. Spiritual soul care offering and call to action. Okay, reflect and journal on the following. Here's our homework. Do you have enslaved ancestors or ancestors who enslaved others in your bloodline? Let me ask that again. Do you have enslaved ancestors or ancestors who enslaved others in your bloodline? If so, have you acknowledged it? Is it acknowledged in your family? How or how not? How does it make you feel? How can you acknowledge it now? Note, if you don't know your ancestor, you can research or tune in and ask them. I know that I have family history, but I have not looked to see if there's any ties to slavery in it. So I got some homework to do. Is there a history of known trauma in your ancestral line? If so, what? How has it shown up in your family line, and has it ever been addressed? How has your race, gender identity, or sexual orientation impacted your health, negatively or positively? When you've finished, find a quiet space where you can be in solitude for at least 10 minutes for the following meditation. And then here's the meditation. Ancestral meditation. As this is our first meditation together, let's take a moment to note that we will be partaking in these practices in a culturally informed way. This begins by acknowledging and honoring the ancient peoples of present-day India, my ancestors, who cultivated and shared the potent practice of meditation with the world so that we can partake in it today. If it is available to you, extend gratitude to the Indian community for the gift of this practice by supporting them in some way, financially, energetically, or otherwise. So there's our note, white people, to make sure that we are paying reverence to the ancestors and to the culture that this meditation and practice of meditation comes from. No appropriation. Now, let's begin. I'm going to try to do my best calm voice. Here we go. Find a position that feels most comfortable for you in your body right now. It can be sitting upright with your feet on the earth, lying down, or otherwise. If it feels sufficiently safe, close your eyes or otherwise lower your gaze. Take a long, slow inhale through your nose, filling your belly and back and body with air. Then take a long, slower exhale out through your mouth, emptying your belly completely. Take 2 more breaths in this manner. Breathe in through your nose, filling your body and back with air, and then a long, slow exhale through the mouth, emptying the air completely. One more time, in through your nose, filling your body with air, long exhale through the mouth. Begin to notice where you may be holding on to tension. Perhaps it's in your shoulders, your jaw, or your brow. As you notice the tension, breathe into those spaces. When you are ready, bring your ancestors into your mind's eye. Ask them to come forth and present themselves to you. You may perceive them through sight, sound, or sensation. Just notice. Ask your ancestors what they most wish for you to know. Perhaps they want to acknowledge the pain they endured at the hands of oppression. Perhaps they wish to express their apologies for the oppression and harm that they inflicted on others. Perhaps both. Tune in, observe, and surrender. If it feels aligned, ask them to help release you from whatever ancestral patterns or stories that no longer serve. Whether you are aware of them or not, feel free to share whatever you wish with them as well. Affirmation, forgiveness, simply bearing witness. Ask them for support as you move through this work, which offers healing for them and for you as well. Then call on all the ancestors of the land you live on, which may include the original indigenous stewards of the land and/or Black folks who were kidnapped, enslaved, and brought to your region, and listen to what they have to say. Finally, thank all the ancestors for communing with you. Slowly open your eyes. and know that you can call on your ancestors for protection and guidance whenever possible. And I suggest you do so as we move through this work together. You may also wish to leave your ancestors an offering to show them gratitude, whatever feels best and right to you, be it a glass of water or wine or a hot meal. They are with you always and in all ways. You are never alone in this work or in the world. And then she has a place where you can go for more meditations to support you on your racial justice journey at her website, www.rachelricketts.com/meditations. That was rough. Whew. I know that when my mom passes, it's going to be one of the hardest things I've ever going to go through. He did. Oh, thank God. I did not see that, Cece. I'm so glad that he's still alive. They need to bring that man home. Whew. Let me see if I can find something. Oh, I did not mean that. Let's see. Proof of life. It was a really tough one. That was a tough chapter. And I'm glad I read it. I'm going to need to unpack that and definitely do some studying and stuff. Kilmar Garcia. I'm looking up on the interwebs. Under the Destiny's Habit. Contact with your mom. That's even harder. So you've already kind of mourned a loss then. Yeah. I see like the pictures. Me too. DOJ releases new documents on Kilmar Abrego Garcia mid-fight to bring him back to the U.S. This is published at 2 a.m. That's not the newest. But it's like showing pictures of his tattooed arm. Is that the one you saw, Cece? I'm starving. I'm so hungry, guys. I think that I am going to call it a night and go find something to eat and look at my ancestor tree. I'm gonna go look at see what I can find. Right? It is almost like we know it's a terrible place and we shouldn't be sending it anywhere. No, I really appreciate it, Cece. It was a hard one, and it's okay. If you, like I said several times, it was a really tough chapter to get through, and yeah. Oh, yeah. So not only did he get proof of life, he saw him, like, saw. This is him sitting at the table with him. Okay, good. Yes, I see it now. NBC Chicago. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen meets Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. Yes, and there they are. There's the picture. Let me make myself bigger. So thank God. Yeah, it's not deportation. It's just enslavement. It's just I mean, the idea that you can take somebody out of the US and put them in El Salvador prison is so disgusting to me. I am appalled. And when I first heard about the plan, like when he met with El Salvador, that was so wrong. It was so wrong. It's been wrong the whole time. And yeah, it is trafficking, kidnapping in the worst way. See my girls, my glasses for Pride. Yeah. They have rainbow mirrors. Can't really tell because it's too bright. Rainbow mirrors. Can't really tell because it's too bright, but yes, I can imagine that that's got to be a relief for him to know that he's not forgotten, that people are definitely crying out for him and others. Because I can't, most of the people down there, they've sent down there because they're criminals. They're not criminals. They're calling anybody who breaks the law criminal. The fact that you've got college students who are a BYU college, which you have to follow the rules to go. He's lost his visa because of traffic violations and a ticket for fishing. These are not criminals. These are not criminals. Traffic violations and tickets for fishing. That's not criminal activity. It's disgusting. So, all right. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me, for making it through that tough chapter. Boop, boop, boop. We did not get bananaed. There was a warning. But when you're saying all the naughty words, because I said all the naughty words, I do not like to censor her story, because it's her story. So take that, TikTok. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Tomorrow. Talk to you. Bye.